Member for North Vancouver Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to speak to Bill 33 until the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Amendment Act 2018. But first, before going specifically to the... Oh, somebody wanted to do an announcement? Introduction. Okay. She wanted...
Member for Burnaby North.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member. I seek leave to make an introduction.
Is leave granted? Proceed.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of introducing Mrs. Sabina McCloskey and her Holy Cross Elementary Grade 5 class, and I believe some parents. Please join me in making them welcome. Thank you.
Member for North Vancouver Seymour will continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And resuming my remarks on the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Amendment Act. Before I get in specifically to the Act, I'd like to go through a little bit of history with regards to all of the investments that our government did with regards to transit and transportation. And just to reiterate that we've been very supportive of the Mayor's Council. As was previously mentioned by the previous speaker, our own mayor in the District of North Vancouver, Richard Walton, has been paramount in working diligently for the region, but also for North Vancouver in his role as the chair of the Mayor's Council, and we support his work. As the member from Kamloops South Thompson said earlier, since 2001, the BC Liberal government invested more than $18 billion in transportation infrastructure upgrades. That includes major projects in the Lower Mainland. Certainly, SkyTrain, the South Perimeter Road, Sea to Sky Highway, the Port Mann Bridge, everybody knows about. Personally, I have a favorite, the Highway Number 1 Lower Lynn Improvement Project, $198 million to improve the all those interchanges, the 3 interchanges, 4 phases. We are expecting that the first phase is supposed to be finished later on this year. Great, everybody in the North Shore is ecstatic about that. And as the members opposite know, that I'm still advocating for at least a consideration by TransLink to investigate the possibility of SkyTrain to the North Shore, and in the meantime, perhaps a beeline from Phibbs Exchange back and forth to match and connect us across the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge to the Millennial Line on the other side. So hopefully that will be coming. I will certainly be advocating for that. But the last budget prepared on this side of the House set aside $3.2 billion for a 3-year plan, which along with the federal investments brought total spending to $4.6 billion. Totally with transit then, since 2001, ridership was up 47%, but funding increased by 132%. And here's a little bit of trivia that people might not know. BC provides the highest level of provincial contribution towards transit operating costs in all of Canada, more than 2 times the national average. And since 2001, our government provided over $2.2 billion to TransLink. And even since 2008, there were significant investments of just under $1 billion, including the Evergreen Line, many bus projects, obviously UBC and Surrey, rapid transit, expansion of buses across the region, expansion of SkyTrains and the West Coast Express, more cars, SkyTrain cars, fare gates, and a new C-bus. And that is in addition to, with the Evergreen Line, $1.43 billion invested by the BC government and its partners. So just to summarize then, that going ahead towards the last election, the BC Liberal government had matched the federal funding and had set up feasibility studies on major new expansion projects, including the east from Evergreen Line towards Maple Ridge and Mission, into South Surrey, into Langley, Abbotsford and Chilliwack, west to UBC, across to the North Shore and up to Squamish. So I wanted to go through this, Mr. Speaker, just so that people realize that despite the rhetoric that's coming from the other side, there was significant investments in transportation and TransLink and BC Transit with our government over the years that we... So yes, as I said, we are very supportive of the transportation infrastructure programs, but we worry, with regards to this bill, that any offloading of the cost of investment into the homeowners during a housing crisis would have a negative effect on housing affordability here in Metro Vancouver. And I know some of my colleagues have already mentioned this, but I'm going to reiterate it. In fact, when it comes to housing affordability, one of the key issues that is very, very important for any government to consider is if you start tacking on more fees, more permits, more taxes, etc., that will actually increase the cost of housing. And it's called development cost charge for high density new housing project. Yes, the government has made some important exemptions, including for not-for-profit rental. But the single most important tool to address is supply, and this government has not done that. So that's encouraging more supply, densification of transit along transit lines, speeding up the approval process in municipalities, and we are going through those growing pains actually in the District of North Vancouver with regards to trying to balance the availability of housing that, for instance, the millennials can afford, keep them on the North Shore. We all want our children to be able to be close to home and not have to move very, very far away. So the District of North Vancouver and the City of North Vancouver is in the middle of a balancing act, trying to increase the diversification of housing. And obviously the residents are concerned about density, are concerned about traffic, etc. So I know it's a balancing act, but it's something that we have to really, really focus on is the supply end of the chain in order to provide more options for people in all levels of affordability. So I do worry about the piling on of all these costs and fees and taxes that might have an unintended consequence. And we have seen during this session that perhaps many initiatives that have maybe good intentions, sometimes when you look at the details and the range of people and say businesses that are affected, sometimes those negative consequences kind of come up to bite you in the you-know-what. So anyways, so what I was going to say is the speculation tax, or so-called speculation tax, which we thought, oh, that would be really, really good because it would stop speculators, but in fact, it doesn't have anything to do with that. In fact, it was an extra tax on, say, cabins or inheritance or wealth. Then, of course, there's the famous employer's health tax that actually will increase costs to nonprofits, school boards, and municipalities. And of course, many of the municipalities have come out publicly, and the mayors have claimed that this will not only increase property taxes, but could have a negative effect on staff or a reduction in services, or all three. And the member from Kamloops South Thompson had mentioned a quote from the Urban Development Institute that from the year 2008 to 2018, so in 10 years, with all of the taxes, fees, permits, community amenities, and all of this stuff piled on to increase the cost of actually building houses, it was a 10-fold increase, or 790% over a 10-year period. So anything that's going to increase the cost of actually building houses would be a disadvantage. So in summary for me, I definitely want to reiterate the importance of transit and certainly the investments in our public transit system, but I worry that these extra costs are going to just pile on extra costs to housing and negatively affect the affordability of housing in Metro Vancouver. So that will be the reason why I will not be supporting this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.